Sarah, thank you so much for taking the time to talk to me today.
Of course, I'm so glad to be here.
For anyone watching who does not know you yet, can you tell just a brief bit about your background and how you got to where you are?
Sure. So I am a full-time public school music teacher. I teach at a high school outside of Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, and I've been there for 14 years. So this is my 14th year teaching. I am classically trained pianist. I grew up playing piano, and I also played some other instruments like flute and tuba in high school. Went to school for music education. At the same time, I also played in rock bands and played a lot of pop music. And so when I was 4 years into my teaching career, I made a bit of a pivot and went back to school to pursue a Ph.D. in music education and do a bit more research on how to merge these two identities that I had into my curriculum. And so I came back into my same classroom following my year of residency, and I've been there ever since. And a couple years ago, I started a music publishing company called F-Flat Books. And let's see what else. I have 3 children, 6 and under. I still play in a band with my husband, who's my drummer, and he's been my drummer longer than he's been my husband. So that's always fun. And I live in Philadelphia.
Can you describe your teaching situation? You've been in school now for how long?
Oh my goodness. I don't even know. I don't know what week it is. 3 weeks with students. This is my 3rd week with students and my 4th week back to work.
Okay, so talk to me about what your school has decided is the best pathway forward at this time.
So we have 2 models. We have a hybrid model and a virtual model. Families can choose between the 2. I have to laugh when I share this because there's a viral video about a mom explaining her child's, I don't know if you've seen it, but this hybrid model.
We call it our simple hybrid model.
And it sounds so outlandish, but it's basically what those of us are experiencing if we're in a hybrid model.
Yes.
So there's hybrid students, and those students are divided into 2 different cohorts, blue and gold.
So now each student has been assigned a cohort color, yellow or blue, very simple.
And so on Monday, I see my blue students in person, my gold students are at home, and my virtual students are at home. On Tuesday, I see my gold students, my blue students are at home, virtual students are at home.
One cohort will attend on Mondays and Wednesdays and every other Friday. The other cohort attends on Tuesdays and alternate Thursdays, but only during months that end in the letter R.
Wednesday, everyone's virtual so they can clean the school, including teachers. Thursday is blue, Friday is gold. So we're on a hybrid schedule. I'll see 30% of my students on any given day, approximately. It kind of varies depending on the class.
Right. So now would be a good time to say you teach orchestra.
Mm-hmm.
And are you doing like a pop music class or anything like that?
Yeah, so I normally run our guitar program, but I don't happen to have any classes this semester just because of how our schedule worked out. So I'm teaching a course called Creativity and Collaboration. I have 3 sections of that, and that's a required course. So every sophomore takes it to graduate, and it's co-taught. So I co-teach with an art teacher. And because those sections are so large, we actually have those classes divided in half. So you're a blue heart or a blue star, or you're a gold heart or a gold star. And depending on whether you're blue or gold or a heart or a star, you go to a different virtual and physical space and swap every 2 weeks. So that's that. I have 3 sections of that. I have 2 sections of string orchestra, and then I have 1 section of a class called Music, Performance, and Production. That's a new class that I designed to work in conjunction with a music studio I was building in our school. However, I can't really have students working in the studio, so it's becoming more of a personal production class. They're working in Soundtrap, and they're working on personal performance skills.
Great. Okay, that sounds like a lot. So you have 30% at one time in front of you, right, where you can physically see them in your brick and mortar, we'll call it the analog teaching space. And then as you're doing the analog, you also have the virtual students Tuning in. Okay, talk to me about some of those logistics in terms of, well, you need to tune some instruments, and you have a specific program that your school has you using. So what are the tools that you're using, and what are any systems that you've come up with to work in those parameters?
This is something that's challenging because ideally our school district was hoping to put cameras in our classroom that could then be live streamed to our virtual students. And most of our classrooms have desktops that are connected to smart boards, and they're quite old desktops, so they don't have cameras built in and they don't have microphones built in. So we also do not have adapters to connect our school laptops to the smart boards. So the day before we saw students, we were basically told, we don't have any tech ready, so figure it out. So we are using Google Meet. We're sort of a Google school, so we have Google Classroom and Google Meet. We're using Google Meet to meet with our virtual students. And so my personal system that I'm using, and this is what's kind of crazy, is every teacher is using a different system based on what works for them in their classroom. I have a MacBook that's on Google Meet in front of me. I'm using that as my camera. And then I'm also logged onto Google Meet on the desktop. And then I'm also projecting Google Meet onto the smart board because I can see more students on the smart board than I can on my desktop computer. So every class I am sort of logging in and out and turning my sound up and down on my different devices depending on what we're doing so that there's no microphone interference with the kids in class. In terms of logistics for tuning instruments and that sort of thing, at home I've been having a breakout room so kids can come in if they're having issues and we can work one-on-one. And students in front of me, this is something I've really struggled with, right? Is this idea that we're distance. I can't be getting close to students like I'm used to. But if a student walks up to you and says, my instrument is really out of tune and I'm struggling, how do you say, I'm sorry, keep struggling, and I'll just watch it from 6 feet away? And so I am grabbing instruments. I am tuning instruments. I'm handing them back. I'm sanitizing my hands, but it's been hard for me to say, no, we're just going to keep this invisible wall between us.
Because the other option is to be like, a little more, try again, a little, too much, go back, okay, this string's broken, okay, and then what,
Exactly. It's hard.
Okay, great. Tell me again about your setup, because I heard you explain it, but I would really like you to explain it again. Logistically, your school said, this is the model that you need to work in. Sorry that we don't have the tech to support this model. You guys are innovative, you'll figure it out. And you said to yourself, I am innovative, aren't I? So you are bringing your personal computer to the school, and you are using your personal computer, which has a camera and a microphone that your school computer does not have. And then you are hooking that up to your smartboard so that you can see in a grid view the students that are in the virtual form of your class. Is that right? Yeah,
and I should say that my MacBook is a school. I own it, but it was issued from the school and I purchased it from the school. So it is still a school-equipped device. Other teachers have regular laptops. It just depends on what that teacher elected to have as their personal device. And I should also mention I'm masked in the classroom, so it's hard for students at home to hear me. Do I need to wait till that stops? Okay.
Nope.
I have children screaming.
This is real life. A better question is, should you go address the children screaming, or is another caretaker?
No, there's another adult with them. I'm almost positive. It'll be fine. This is what teaching from home is like. This happens throughout the day, and sometimes I say to my students, okay, we're going to pause till the screaming ends, and then we'll resume our lesson. Anyway, I think just to paint a picture, I am wearing a mask, and my students at home can't read my lips if I'm wearing a mask, and they can't hear very well. So I did buy, with my own money, one of those, Britney Spears microphones or McDonald's mic that has a built-in speaker that I wear throughout the day so that it helps amplify my voice. It definitely helps the students at home hear me better. But everything else you said is correct. I'm using my laptop that I'm on right now as my camera and my microphone, and then I'm using the Smartboard Google Meet to project or to share video content or any media that I'm doing and to see my students.
Right, yeah, because I know that visual element is so important. Okay, can you tell me what about your current teaching pathway, your current decisions? What about this is working?
I was thinking about this today because I know this series is entitled What's Working, and what I have to be encouraged by every day is that if we make efforts to connect with students, whether it's through a screen or it's in person, we will make connections. And I think that's the thing I was most afraid of, especially with my general music class. On day one in that class, I am normally going up to every single student individually as they're completing this thing that we do where they're moving throughout the space in my classroom. And I'm going up to each one of them and saying their name, looking them in the eye, welcoming them, making sure they know I care about them. And it's a large class. Like I said, it's over 40 students. So that is so critical for me to establish from day one. I'm here, I see you, I'm for you, we're a community, we're going to have a great semester. And it was really hard for me on Google Meet to say, okay, now I see 40 squares. Most of them don't have their cameras turned on. And now all sorts of shenanigans are going down in the chat. And so I feel like I have to be extra mean to make sure that the chat doesn't get out of control. And all of these different types of classroom management I haven't experienced before. And so my thought was, there's no way I will be able to connect with these students in the way that I always did. And after being in a few weeks, because now we know that I'm 3 weeks in, I don't believe that that's true now. I'm seeing that I'm building connections with students. The shenanigans on the chat are ending. They haven't happened in over a week. Students are reaching out to me. I am realizing I have to put myself out there 100 times more than I would if we were all in person. And so if a student gives me an inch to welcome me into their space or their music or their projects, I have to take a mile. So I do think that some of the ways of connecting are working. I've been trying regularly to connect with students in Google Docs, so they keep a daily log of what they've been working on. That way, if they're not comfortable coming to a breakout room with me or they're not comfortable unmuting themselves in our Google Meet, I can send them a message on Google Doc and say, hey, that's great that you're working on this. What do you need support in, or how can I help you? And I found that some of the students that don't connect with me on Google Meet will connect with me on Google Docs. So I'm just trying to connect with them in multiple spaces and then see what sticks for each student.
Right. Definitely. Okay, so you are saying that you were kind of thrown into the fire this semester, and it sounds like one of the things that is important to you is making connections with students. And I heard you say that you have a very specific routine that you go through at the beginning of the year to make a pointed, conscious, concrete effort to connect with your students on an individual level. And so now you have these new horizons of classroom management, and you have this new horizon of teacher-student communication. And along with that, you have new horizons of student-to-student communication, right? And you're juggling all of those. And at some time in this class, we're also going to make music somewhere, right? So all of these things that you are kind of balancing. And what I hear you say is that you have found success in, tell me if this is correct or not, you have found success, emerging success sometimes, at building relationships with students by experimenting with many different forms of communication.
Absolutely. And I think for me, and I think a lot of other people in my position will probably relate to some extent, with my ensemble program, if these are students who are not freshmen, I've had them before, we've established those relationships, and I can pull the new students into this community that has already been built. They can feel a sense of community that's already been captured. In a smaller class, it's easier to do that as well. In my music and production class, there's 9 kids in that class. And that has been such a fun course to teach because everyone's interacting. The students feel safe as far as I can tell because it's a low pressure environment and it's not a huge class. It's really those huge general music classes that I think are the hardest because they're not students who chose to be there. And I know a lot of music teachers who teach general music, you're teaching every student whether or not they chose to be there. So they didn't choose to be there. And they don't have any reason for trusting me or for buying into what I'm selling because they didn't choose to be there. So there has been a ton of experimentation. And you just can't predict. On a average year, after teaching for 14 years, I can predict what sort of things my students will try to do on day one to derail the whole train.
Yep.
And I can predict it and I can be prepared. I was not prepared that a student would pick up a dog in Google Meet and suddenly there'd be 10 dogs in my screen.
Right.
And that who knows who decided they would do this, but how do you prepare for a kid who is deciding to go to Starbucks during class and is keeping her camera on and telling everyone in the chat that she's going to Starbucks? These are just things I wasn't prepared for. And so I felt like after the first week of class, it was kind of backpedaling and developing these what I called hybrid handbooks that I gave out to each class and went through them and then was able to say, like, let's not pick up animals during class as much as we love them. And if we're going to go to Starbucks during class, which I'd recommend not doing, turn off your camera. So I try to be lighthearted about it and make, a joke of it and still make kids feel welcome, but I just couldn't predict any of that.
Right. One of the best classroom management book I have ever come across is called Teaching with Love and Logic. And there's a phrase in there that is essentially like, just because I like you doesn't mean you can get away with this kind of behavior. Come on. And so it addresses the behavior that the student is exhibiting without calling into question the relationship or my approval of you as a person. And I hear you say that, and again, like the term New Horizons comes up for me because there's nothing in Teaching with Love and Logic about how to deal with a kid holding up a dog during hybrid learning, right? There's nothing out there. And so there's no way you could have been prepared for what the first day of school looks like here, I need to hear every detail possible about these hybrid handbooks. You made these, this is something that you had to adapt, and you didn't walk in with a hybrid handbook. It sounds like this was developed out of a need that arose in the classroom. So tell me step by step exactly what your hybrid handbook is and how is it different from your syllabus?
That's a great question. Normally on day one of every class, I lay out the entire semester. Here's what everything is going to look like that we do. Here's what the expectations are. If it's my performing class, here's where the concerts are. Instead, day one were Google slideshows of question marks, basically. We don't know what it's going to look like. And I tried to frame it in a way that was excited. I tried to be excited about it. Like, hey, kids, everything's different. Are we having a winter concert? We don't know, but I bet we're going to come up with something really cool.
What a mystery. Ooh.
Yeah, because I legitimately did not know. And I still don't really know about that question. Yep. But I did try to put on the slide on the first day, what do we know? And so those were kind of our core beliefs. We know that this is a space where all are welcome. We know that this is a space where music making will happen. This is a space where I will listen to you and I will try to support you. We did a couple of trauma-informed professional developments. And the thing that stuck with me the most is that what our students might need most of all is small goals that are right in front of them. And I understand this too. For me, coming out of the spring and trying to wrap my head around things, it's much easier for me to look at a day's to-do list than to think about what December is going to look like. That feels too overwhelming. So I tried to not focus too much on the distant future, but I try to focus on the present. What is this week going to look like? What is class going to feel like on a regular basis? And to establish routines. So then after the first week, I developed a handbook that would have 4 different things. I wanted to talk a little bit about expectations. So for my people who are in person versus my Google Meet students, what are they expected to do when they arrived? How are they expected to use the chat? How are they expected to communicate questions? Then we talked about schedule. So I did make a set schedule for all of my classes. And this wasn't a schedule in terms of content. The content's flexible, but it was a schedule in terms of the modes of engagement. So when would students be working independently? When would students be having peer group feedback? When would students be sharing work in progress? When would students be doing full group share outs? And what would Wednesdays, which are kind of more asynchronous, look like? I wanted to develop daily routines. So if a kid logs on a Tuesday, they know what to anticipate and they don't feel, they're never caught off guard by the way that our classroom feels or looks. And then I talked about communication in that packet as well and gave them some guidelines around communicating with me and also to establish boundaries of when and how I will respond back to them. Sure. Because in the spring, what wasn't working is being a 24/7 educator. Definitely. And so I need to have, structure around my time. And so it was non-specific in some ways, but in other ways, I think specific enough that students were able to say, okay, this is what's expected of me, and this is what I need to do to be successful in this class.
Okay, great. So if the question of this series is what's working, that is such a tangible example of coming up with a concrete solution for an observed problem. How many pages is this document?
It's a Google slideshow. It's probably about 10 slides.
Okay. And then is this something that you're giving to your ensembles only, or does it apply to your general music class, or what?
Every class has a different one. And this is something I also used. So tonight is our virtual back to school night, and that's what I'm sharing with parents so that they're on the same page. They know what our classroom looks like and they know what to expect.
Awesome. I see this concept working incredibly well for teachers in so many different situations, like so many different teaching situations, so many different ensemble situations, grade level situations. I see this working really, really well. And what I like about it is that these are things that you could not have anticipated before you put in the first week and a half, right, of teaching in this hybrid model. And so I like that you didn't say, oh, it wasn't in the syllabus, I can't change it now, right? The syllabus had gaps because you had gaps in knowledge and the students had gaps in knowledge. So now, at the very least, we are on the same page about expectations. The other thing that makes me really happy to hear and that I feel just more calm listening to you talk about is that the content can be flexible in each different scenario. But how I am asked to show up as a student, I will always know how to show up as a student. I think for the people watching, I think most of them are probably working with the elementary age level, and this is something that I definitely see being valuable for 4th and 5th graders who have a little bit more agency in their logging in, logging off process. I love the idea of, regardless of what happens when you log in, I know exactly what is expected of me in terms of showing up. I think that's really beautiful.
Yeah. And I think too, establishing routines where students log in, they have a countdown timer, they have music playing, and then they have a do now. So we've established routines where there's always something for them to be doing when they come into our classroom, whether it's virtual or physical. And it's something that's educational, but it's still really fun. So like for my production class, we use something called Sound Gym, and it gives you a daily ear training workout, and it's all based on music production. And it takes about 5 minutes. And they're really fun to do. It feels like a game, but you're training your ears, and it's good for them to do. So they know that they log in, their countdown's going on, they put on their headphones, they do their Sound Gym workout. And so that looks different than it did in years past because I wasn't having students on computers right away in my space, even though we were a one-to-one district. But it's interesting. I think a lot of teachers are feeling this way. It's interesting being in this position and saying, okay, well, what will I keep? You know, what of these routines am I actually going to keep? And in some ways, I'm not even planning for this school year. I feel like everything I'm doing, I'm planning for my future classroom.
Ooh.
When it goes back to normal, because it's not going to look how it did last fall. It's going to be better because I'm learning so much through teaching in this modality of what I was missing before and what's really good for students that we've been forced into. And that to me is exciting. And I think that's what keeps me positive, is just thinking I'm workshopping all of this incredible material that will be for the benefit of our future classroom as well, not just for this year.
So you're talking about all of the things that you couldn't have imagined would be better. All of the things that you couldn't have imagined that you would benefit from changing or from rethinking or workshopping. Because at the time, this was not in any textbook, right? Like, Sarah, you have a Ph.D. and no one showed up and said, hey, perhaps you should rethink these things about our teaching profession as we know it. No one had thought to think this much out of the box. And I can imagine for someone like you, who is naturally an out-of-the-box thinker, that could be really exciting.
It is. And I think I recognize that not everyone feels this way, but the challenge of finding things that work is exciting. I don't want to gloss over the things that are hard, because I think a lot of mourning has happened, and I think a lot of mourning will continue to happen, you know, even to the point when I do see a kid who's at home and who's struggling to tune their instrument, and I miss hearing my ensemble all together synchronously in one space. You know, if I think about that too long, I'll probably get emotional, because those things are so near and dear to my heart. So I don't think that being excited and inspired means that we forget what's hard. And I think we need to do that with our students too. You know, even if on day one I'm saying to them, hey, look at all this cool stuff we could do, and guess what? We're having an artist in residence. I could never say to them, so everything is fine. That's not fair. I need to say, this is exciting, but also tell me how you're feeling. Like, how do you feel about orchestra this year? How was the spring for you? How are you coping with this new hybrid model? And for my kids who are in person, I'm regularly asking, which days feel better for you? Do the in-person days or the days that you're at home? And why? What are the benefits? And just to give them some space for grief, which I think we as teachers need too. But in general, I find that the idea of innovating and kind of the pressure being taken off of us as a profession in terms of what our end product has to look like is such a gift, because we can experiment and there's no right answer.
Yes, absolutely. This is a unique opportunity to try things that we've never had the option to try, or that we never felt that we had permission to try. So many of us have been in this model of teaching for the concert. And if you don't have any reason to think you're going to have a concert, then what would you do instead? Well, and we've said this for years, teachers have said this for years, like, I would love to do X, but we have this concert coming up. What are you going to do? And so now it's like, okay, let's take that excuse and put it on the back burner. What will you do now with these students whose faces are in front of you, whether there's faces on the screen or 6 feet apart from you? I think that's such a powerful way to frame it.
And also acknowledging, I mean, this might be somewhat of a pivot, but I was thinking about it with you specifically. So you and I have met over Zoom a number of times over the past, 6 months to a year. I've never met you in person, but if someone said, do you know Victoria? I would say, yeah, I know her. And I feel like I have a good sense of who you are. But it made me realize all of the knowledge that I've learned from you has been through a screen.
Yeah.
Whether it's through Instagram or through Zoom. Yep. And so I'm learning that I can learn a lot about my students, and they can learn a lot about me. But it is going to take that sort of concerted effort of finding where they are.
Right. Yeah, I think that is wonderful, and what a great way to think about it. Can you tell me what your Wednesdays look like? What is the class structure of a Wednesday rehearsal?
It's changed a couple of times since school started. The first week of school, most of us were just teaching synchronously as we would in the classroom, just from home instead of being in the classroom with possibly children screaming in the background. That's how it was for me. I think our administration realized that what was being required of teachers is extremely challenging. And I do want to put that out there because this has been hard in terms of time and preparation.
Yes.
I haven't planned during the evenings in years. I can usually get my planning done during my prep period. And even if I don't have something perfectly planned, walking into a classroom and just establishing a lesson feels easy to me. But with this new model, so much of it has to be pre-made. It has to be content that's ready to go. So I find that, I'm working, I come home, I'm having dinner with my family, I'm trying to be present for my kids, and then I put them to bed, and then I'm planning again. Right. And till late in the evening.
Yeah.
And so I don't want to discredit the fact that this is really hard. Logistically, it's hard. And so I think our administrators realized our teachers are not going to survive the year. So they said Wednesdays are kind of up to us in how we want to run our class. We still need content for students, but it can be asynchronous, or we can use it for small group sessions, or we can use it however we want, and then have some extra time for planning. So I am using that as asynchronous time where every class I'm preparing work for them to do that I'll be checking in on. And then for my orchestra specifically, I'll be using the next 4 Wednesdays to get to know my freshmen. So normally I'll do assessments in the beginning of the year while they're play for me, and I get to hear where they're at. And so instead I'll be doing that over Google Meet on Wednesdays during their class time. And then I have a select ensemble that will be rehearsing on Wednesdays. So it's kind of a hodgepodge of different things.
Right. Yeah, it sounds like that system is evolving as the needs arise. Is that what you would say?
Yeah, and I think I heard this in the spring too. Teachers want to do it right. So there's so many questions in terms of, well, what are we supposed to be doing, and what's the expectation of us, and how can I make sure that I'm doing the right thing and doing enough work and living up to the expectation. And I think for a lot of our administrators, they also don't know. They also are saying, we're not sure. So every week it seems like there's more clarifying answers to questions that people are asking, but really we created a system and set it loose without any idea how it would really look.
Right? I think it is, I could be wrong, I think it might be Anne Lamont who did Bird by Bird, and she talks about for any children listening, she talks about the poopy first draft, and that your first draft, you just need to get out into the world, right? So whatever you don't know about the first day of school, you have to have the first day of school, right? Whatever you don't know about the first 3 weeks of hybrid learning or of completely virtual learning, the only way to know that is to make a good plan, implement it, and then tweak from there. You have to have your first draft out into the world. And exactly what you said, Sarah, about teachers feeling like we need to do it right the first time, because otherwise, like, what's our worth? Why are we here? Why was I put on this earth except to do everything correctly the very first time? And what you're describing is a system where you pivot and you listen to students. I don't know how many times, Sarah, in your talk just now, you described how you seek out the lived experiences of your students, and you use that information to tweak your future learning strategies, you know, and I think that is really, really beautiful. Of all of the things you've talked about, and you even mentioned specifically that there's some leniency that your district has given you in terms of what the very specific schedule and very specific parameters of your teaching need to look like. Since they don't know, they're not really telling you what to do. And so you're making your decisions based off of your value system. Can you tell me some of the values that brought you to these specific decisions about teaching right now?
Sure. I think at the core is that every student has the capacity for music making and for music making to be an incredibly fulfilling part of their life for the rest of their lives. That is sort of my underpinning philosophy for everything I do, is how do we create lifelong music learners? How do I create autonomous musicians? How do I provide students with tools that they will then take and run with those tools? So right now, I'm recognizing that my students are coming to me with a variety of experiences. Some of them have come through these past 6 months somewhat unscathed, as much as it could be. Yeah. Others have come through these past 6 months and they're barely getting by right now. And so how can music meet the needs of all of those students? And how can it meet the needs in a way where the student feels empowered to take advantage of the tools they have without a teacher in front of them directing them? And so in all of my classes right now, we're doing projects and we're doing work where there's a lot of independent work that I'm checking in on so they can start developing their own habits of music making. And these are some students who have never touched an instrument before, all the way to my orchestra students who have not existed in this personal music space. So that's really important to me. How am I giving them tools to be autonomous musicians? And the benefit is, you know, I had a student today who's in my production class, and at the moment they all have their first unit is about harmonic instruments. So they're developing a bass so that when they go into the studio, they can use that to start creating tracks. And so it could be ukulele, guitar, or piano. So if I'm having kids just go into their studio and they've never played an instrument before, I kind of explain to them, you know, every producer and engineer, even if they can't play a crazy amount on the piano, they can operate a MIDI keyboard. So let's develop some personal goals. But then you see the student who's taken a ukulele home, and then today she pops on Google Meet and says, I played for 4 hours yesterday because I was having so much fun. And this is someone who never played the ukulele before. And so I'm seeing music as healing. And so if I give them the tools, physical tools, but also software tools, where they can get lost in music making, that is 100% what my goal is.
Right. I love that. That's awesome. So what you're describing in your values is that every student is musical. We are making lifelong musicians. We want music to meet the emotional needs of our students, and we want to make connections with our students. And it occurs to me that none of these are brick and mortar building specific, right? Like your value system that you just described, Sarah, can be implemented in any situation. The question is, what is the specific wording that I need in my hybrid handbook to make students successful, right? But the hybrid handbook is not there as the music class itself. The hybrid handbook is there to serve your value system and how that is implemented in the classroom.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think what's hard for a lot of us is to develop to develop a community of practice that embodies those four things. It's very different, virtual and hybrid, than it is in person. And so finding out what works, I think, is going to take longer, but that it's not going to be impossible.
I want to shift gears to something a bit more personal in your life, which is we've talked a lot about the role of Dr. Gulish, the educator, but you have other hats that you wear, and the one that I've heard you mention in your talks in answers to other questions has been the role of Dr. Gulish as the mother. And you have a kindergartner who's full-time virtual education, as you are being required to be a brick and mortar teacher full-time. Very logistically, how are you making that work?
Well, for my whole family scope, I have a son who's 6. He's in kindergarten. It's virtual. He is walking around the corner every morning to our neighbor's house, who has a daughter who's also in his class, and they're doing school together, where a recent college grad is being paid to oversee their schooling. So we are paying someone to oversee them, make sure they're doing their classwork, make sure that they have everything they need, and then also taking them to the rec center so they can run around in the middle of the day. I have a 2-year-old and a 3-year-old daughter that are in my home, and my sister comes every day and brings her twin 1-year-olds and watches my girls. And so we have multiple people watching children. We have an added expense, which I understand. I think that's what's hard for me too, is realizing that we're in a position where we can split the cost of having someone help our son do school.
Right.
But most families can't do that. And so a lot of families I know in my city are stuck, and we have rec centers that are open and libraries that have shifted to help, with families in need who need oversight over their children's learning. And then my husband and I we're kind of on Wednesdays and other days that we're a little bit more flexible, just trying to sort of bounce back and forth to make it work.
Right. Okay, so you kind of have 2 micro schools going on, because you have the one for your child who is in school, and then you have kind of like a separate, happy, fun playtime micro school going on. This might not make it into the interview, but do you think that families could do the micro school more easily? What I hear you describe is that you are going in with another family, so then you're splitting the cost of this college grad between 2 families. Do you think that this could be feasible for some people who really need a solution right now if they were splitting it between 6 families?
Absolutely, and I know people who are doing that in my son's class. Yeah.
Okay.
I think this is 2020 to me.
Yes.
2020 is weighing health and wellness above everything else, right? So if I'm looking at, and this is very personal, but if I'm looking at my family's budget and saying, this is what it will cost us extra to have my son socializing in a safe way and to have his education overseen by someone who cares about him, is it worth the financial strapping us financially, or maybe having to cut back in certain ways for 3 months, because right now we're just planning till mid-November. Can we commit to this for 3 months? Because, we're able to do it if we move X, Y, and Z, and we think it's the best for his health and wellness. And so that's a conversation we had to have, because up until 2 days before his school started, we weren't planning on doing that. We were just planning on trying to figure out how to teach him ourselves or have my sister help him. And it just became increasingly clear that it was going to be hard.
Right. So if we want to tie that back into our value system, our finances have always been a tool that we use to live our values. And your question is, what financial decisions would it take for us to facilitate this level of emotional wellness that we do value as a family? And it sounds like you are willing to explore what other decisions would have to fall in line with that value system. And I know that that's a conversation that so many families are having and have had in the past several months. So thank you for sharing that, because like you said, it is personal, and there's not a right decision. There's not a correct decision for any family. That's good. Along those same lines, Sarah, you are a full-time educator. You also are a mom to 3 and a wife to 1. You're the founder and CEO of a publishing company. You are a professor at universities where you teach music education courses. You also have personal music projects that you take on. Do you ever feel overwhelmed?
Never. I texted a friend the other day and I said, you know what? So I've had an ER visit since school started. Yesterday I got a COVID test, which is a whole nother story, and I think I'm fine. I'm pretty sure I'm fine. But I said either someone is answering some of my prayers or I'm just dead inside because I don't feel overwhelmed. And she goes, I don't think you're dead inside. But I keep coming back to this idea of trauma, and I keep coming back to this idea of what we can manage and what we can handle. I don't let myself think beyond what's in front of me unless it's life-giving.
Yes.
So if planning for the future with my publishing company is life-giving, I will do that. If thinking about what my curriculum looks like in 2 months feels overwhelming, I think about what I'm doing tomorrow. And I think I've worked on making that a conscious practice of just really blocking out mentally what I need to block out. And in a practical way, I'm really scheduled. It's the only thing that works for me. So I have my night every week, and that's when I do my F-flat meetings, and that's when I work on the company. I have a night every week, and that's for my husband, for us to spend time together, for us to connect. I have my time for my children between 4 and 7 p.m. where my phone is away and I'm with them and I'm a mom. And so I've really had to time block and mental block my life to make it work. And it has worked so far. We're 4 weeks in, I've realized. And so far I don't feel overwhelmed. I don't. But I do. I'm not someone who never feels overwhelmed. But at the moment I've been given some grace that I haven't been in a state of overwhelm.
Right. So you're saying that you look for what gives you life, and then you schedule to the extent that is possible at all. You schedule your life around things that bring you more life. And that sounds like a nada, but that's a super valuable thing for us to hear.
I think it's also good to really think about what your personal human limits are. What are your relationship limits in terms of how much you can give to other people emotionally?
Right.
What are your physical limits and how much you can give for a time of the day before you'll crash? How much sleep do you need? And what's your social media limit? How much Facebook scrolling can you do before you want to go cry in the corner? For me, it's like 1 minute. So knowing those limits and really trying to have healthy boundaries, I think, is so essential right now.
I don't know if I shared that with you. My idea for the What's Working series was, did I already tell you this? Was going on Facebook groups and just seeing, like, so I would go on Facebook and just see, like, how are people doing? What's the sense? Like, what's the plan for us as an industry? What are we doing? And so I would go on Facebook and kind of scroll for a second and then be like, nothing really here. And I would log off. And then like 2 hours later, I'm like weeping about nothing. And I'm like, what is this? And I'm like, I know exactly what it is. It's because I was looking for answers, and I went to a place full of answers without any parameters on who is allowed to influence my thinking. And so that was obviously not a good solution. And I said, I am a super intelligent person, and I'm intelligent enough to know that not everyone is allowed to influence how I view the world. So who are the people that I want to influence how I view this crisis. And that's what this series was. I will no longer go to Facebook groups. The academic literature is not out there because my first step was to go to JSTOR and to Eric and to see what people had to say about teaching music during COVID-19. And obviously it wasn't out because this is new. And so I said, I'll do it myself. I'll find the people who are the experts and I will ask them, what should we do right now?
Yeah, and I think, I hate the expression like good vibes only, because I think we should be okay with negative vibes, but I really feel like I've had to do that in my own personal life and say, okay, if this person wants to spiral negativity about teaching right now, I know it's not going to help me. Right. And I hope that they get the help they need. I hope they get the encouragement they need, but I can't be a spiral partner. I have to try and stay positive and move forward and find ways to say that. And I think Facebook, different social media platforms can be spirals. And so if you want to be in that space, it's a great space to be in. But I don't think many of us benefit in our classrooms if we're in a negative space.
Right. Yeah, I hear you say, I accept every single emotion that I live. I accept everything that I feel right now. I move forward in ways that will be productive to me and the people I care about. Sarah, you have described some systems. You have described some things that are going well. You've described some things that you are still tweaking or that you learned still need to be tweaked. What would it look like for you to get support? What could support in this process look like for you?
I think as a hybrid brick and mortar and virtual teacher, I think we would do better if we had more prep time for teachers. I'm reminded of this. I've been actually teaching from home the past couple of days because my family's been sick with a cold and we have to take precautions. And I'm realizing that I'm not losing time spraying down chairs. I'm not losing time getting my Google Meet set up and my microphone set up and my mask and all of these different things. And so our instructional time is cut so short and our planning requirements are so much larger. So I think we need more time. We need more prep time. And whether that means scheduling classes differently or what, we are desperate for time. We need tech support. So I think it's really hard to throw teachers into a teaching environment and not have any sort of example for what it's supposed to look like and to just say, figure it out. Like I said, I haven't felt that overwhelmed because I enjoy problem solving in that way, but for a lot of teachers, it's been crushing, and for teachers who, want to move throughout the building. So I think tech support is really, really big, and I think just a campaign to get rid of all of the misinformation about teachers in the world. So if you can do that, Victoria, that would be fantastic. But in all seriousness, I would just love to bring every naysayer towards education into any of these classrooms and just see how hard these teachers are working. And this can get me emotional, but I recorded my coworker on the first day of school because I see her with a guitar on her Google Meet and then kids in person, and she's doing a song and dance and kids are learning, and I'm just like, and then she comes into the office and she falls to the ground and she crumbles and she starts to cry. And teachers are amazing. Teachers are working so hard, and I have heard such awful things said about teachers. And so I would love to somehow show the world that what teachers are doing right now is incredible, and it is for none other reason that they adore students.
Yes.
It's not because they love figuring out Google Meet. It's not because they enjoy spraying chairs. It's not because they want to be staying up till midnight figuring out how to do a Padlet or a Nearpad. It's because they love human beings so much. And so I would just love the world to know that.
Sarah, you have given us so much to think about. You've given us so much to chew on, both in these big picture values-based ideas and these very practical things like how you schedule your classes and your hybrid handbook, things like that. In your own words, what is working for you?
What is working for me is coming back to why I am in the classroom in the first place, and it is to connect with students through music. And so anytime I lose my way, what is working is how can I connect to students through music?
Sarah, where can people find all of the amazing work that you do?
Well, they can follow our company. So I do post a lot on Instagram for F-Flat Books, just at FFLAT Books. And I usually share throughout the school day when I'm in school as well about my experiences teaching, or on our website, fflat-books.com. And yeah, that's where I mostly hang out.
What can teachers do to support you right now? Would it be helpful if they followed your YouTube channel? Would it be helpful if they followed you on Instagram? Do you have any resources that could help them in return? Is there a way for them to support you?
Yeah, so following us on Instagram is fantastic. And supporting our authors. We have so many authors who have created resources that support hybrid, virtual, remote, in-person learning. And when you purchase anything from our site, the majority of the proceeds go directly to them. So if you are even feeling stuck on what to teach tomorrow, we have something to help you. And I'd encourage teachers to come and check out what we have. And if they don't see something they need, to reach out to us, because we're always adding new resources.
Beautiful. Sarah, thank you so much for your time. It has been really, to use your words, it has been life-giving to have this conversation. So thank you so much.